Hello friends and freaks, it's Onion Creature, and today's topic is the era of weird Nintendo remakes. And this is a trend that has continued to become prevalent in the latter years of the Nintendo Switch, which is now winding up its life cycle and is allegedly set to be replaced by a successor next year. It seems that on the Switch, Nintendo is giving these older series a new chance at life with these revitalized versions. I'd like to discuss some of these titles, as some of them are actually really great and worthy of talking about, even though they might not be the biggest blockbuster titles. They offer quite a lot of value and are pretty interesting to dissect. I have a topic for the day. It is all these weird goddamn Nintendo remakes that they keep making on the Nintendo Switch. This has been happening, I'd say, for a while now. Sort of been ramping up in the last couple of years of the Switch, and it seems to me that Nintendo has run out of Wii U games to port to the Switch, and in order to keep the release schedule filled out, they are now having to dig into the wells of their past and get some developers to cook up reimagined versions of older titles, some of which are fairly obscure and are being given a new chance at life on one of the highest selling consoles ever released. So I've played several of these games, and there's actually even more coming. We'll look into this, and it's an interesting trend that we've been seeing in the latter years of the Nintendo Switch, and honestly, I like it a lot. I like seeing weird Nintendo remakes coming out from out of nowhere. Very interesting time indeed. It's been quite a fascinating era to be a Nintendo enjoyer. So I'll be talking about titles that were published directly by Nintendo and are odd choices indeed. These are remakes that just came out of nowhere and took everyone by surprise because no one expected them to ever be made. Oh, door. I got bad news, everybody. My Xenoblade sticker is falling off my PC. It's not good. Here's our first item. It's Famicom Detective Club. This is a compilation of 2 titles, both of which were Japan exclusive up until this remake. It's a old school adventure game. It's sort of viewed as a proto Ace Attorney, and in that respect, I really enjoyed these titles. Of course, being called Famicom Detective Club, they were originally released on the Famicom. I think there was a remake on the Super Famicom for one of them through like the Satellaview or something. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this prehistoric series. Yeah, it's always cool to see a previously Japan exclusive game get a full English translation and release in other regions. Huh. These games are really fun. I like the artwork and voice acting. The voice acting is still all in Japanese, but the text has been fully translated. Quite like the script of this. They're good murder mysteries. They keep you on your toes. The gameplay is dated, but I wouldn't say it's excessively dated, and you can still get through them. There were a couple times where I had to look up what to do, but it wasn't too frequent. Very simple gameplay, but you're kind of more in it for the story and the unraveling of the narrative. So I played them in release order, but you could also play them in chronological order. So The Missing Heir takes place after The Girl Who Stands Behind, but you can play them in either order, and I played them in release order, which honestly I think worked out. I don't think it really affects your experience all that much if you do either way. I like them about the same. The Missing Heir overall I think a little more, but The Girl Who Stands Behind does have a better finale and more variety. It's more grounded than something like Ace Attorney. There's a good sense of realism to the events and the characters, with obviously some amount of heightened reality in that it's a detective game and you're like a teenage detective, which is kind of inherently a goofy concept, but it takes itself seriously enough. Yeah, definitely would recommend these games, especially if you are a fan of anything like Ace Attorney. It's just an early version of that, and I think it functions very well. In terms of sales, I don't think it's sold particularly well outside of Japan. I was checking the eShop charts around when this released, and it did get into the charts in the Japanese eShop, but not in the US eShop, so definitely did not have as much appeal in English-speaking regions, which I guess makes sense, since no one outside of Japan has any pre-existing knowledge of the series, really, and even as a Nintendo series, it's pretty obscure. I didn't even know about this game until it released on Switch. It was a pleasant surprise. It's really nice. It's a good time. Very weird choice to remake it, but by God, am I glad they did. It was a fun discovery. Our next title is Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, remake of the Advance Wars series, the first two titles on Game Boy. I had not played any Advance Wars titles before this game, and I really like it. I like the core gameplay more than the developer Intelligent Systems' other strategy RPG series, Fire Emblem. The story does not take itself as seriously as a Fire Emblem. The story is a lot less in-depth as well. You know, it's pretty basic in terms of the narrative. You're really there for the strategy gameplay, which is a lot of fun. This remake was done by WayForward, and they did a pretty good job. It's not flawless. There's some weird frame rate issues in the battle sequences, and the overall visual style that they chose to go with is good in concept, but the execution is lacking. It's sort of supposed to look like you're viewing an overhead view of a strategy map that you would use for a battle, so the characters are supposed to look like little figures, but it doesn't quite perfectly achieve that effect. It looks good, but not exceptional. This game was delayed a whole year because of a real-life war that happened just before it was supposed to release, so that may have dampened its reception when it did release. I guess it was largely just due to optics, which is understandable, but it's certainly possible that hampered the sales potential of this game. But I do really like it. It's charming. I played through both of the titles, and there's some additional content, like there's online multiplayer. You can make your own battle maps. But yeah, you know, this is a good time, good introduction to this series. Very unexpected as well to see them return and have WayForward as the developer. Would be good to see WayForward work on more Nintendo remakes. That would be good. They're a good fit for remaking some of these classic titles. We had a recent title which came out in January, and that's Another Code Recollection. I literally did not know of this series until it started getting leaked that there was going to be a Nintendo Switch remake of the DS and Wii title. It's called Trace Memory in the US, and then the sequel to Another Code on Wii never released in the United States, though it was in Europe and Japan. So I had no familiarity with this, and I played it, and I thought, this is an interesting one. I gotta be honest, of the titles I'm talking about today, this is probably my least favorite. It's not bad per se, but I don't know. This is, let's just describe it briefly. It's another sort of adventure game, this time taking place in a 3D environment, and you play as the character Ashley Robbins, who is a character. I don't have too much to say about her. She is going on simple little adventures in a little house in the first game, and then at a lake in the second game. I will be honest, I did expect a little bit more from this game. So in terms of the gameplay, you kind of just walk around and you look at stuff and listen to dialogue, and occasionally there are puzzles, a few of which were pretty good. Some of them require a legitimate level of thought. A lot of them, though, really were a bit too simplistic for my taste. A lot of these two games did kind of feel like filler to me, especially in the second game. I feel like there's a lot of dialogue between characters that don't further the main plot, and that's fine in concept, but I did not really care that much about the side characters that were being introduced. There's just a lot of stuff that, I don't know, was not super engaging to me. And then there's just long gaps between the puzzles sometimes. You're just listening to this dialogue. Just was not super engaged throughout a lot of this. There are certainly some high points in the storyline. The finale of the second game is pretty good, and the finale of the first game is pretty good. It just takes a long time to get to that point, and the build-up is not always that enjoyable. Some things I like about this game is the sound design is pretty good sound effects. The music's pretty nice. The character models are also pretty good. They look like high-quality character models, and there's some character illustrations which are very well illustrated and look pretty cool. However, there's a lot of flaws in this in terms of visuals. Basically, all of the environments feel like they have really low texture detail to a highly noticeable degree.
which is weird. Not to say that nothing happens in this game, but like you're basically just walking around the whole time, which is fine, but I would expect it to look a little better given that fact. There's objects that you can pick up and look at. In this game, there's just like often has pixelated textures. I don't know, man. I don't know what the budget on this game was, but really shouldn't be that demanding. I think it runs at 30 frames per second as far as I could tell. The environments aren't particularly big either. They're honestly small compared to most other Switch games I've played, so I don't know what's going on there. This is a Nintendo published game, and I do tend to hold those to a higher standard. Not to say I dislike this game, but that is a pretty major flaw that was evident through the whole experience. Also, just touch on the voice acting. I played the game with English voice acting, though it does include Japanese voice acting, and it's pretty good. Nothing amazing, but nothing too bad either. It's all just fine for my tastes. And you know what was really weird is, like, at the beginning of the first game, there's one puzzle with where you use the Switch gyro, and then that isn't brought back until 3/4 of the way through the second game. And I was like, oh right, this game has gyro puzzles. It's very bizarre. Of Nintendo releases, this is definitely not one of my favorites. There are bright spots in those moments that are slower, and I don't mind a game that's slower. I just didn't find this one particularly engaging, so not really one I would readily recommend to most people. It doesn't seem to have sold all that much. It did get on the top 30 charts on the Japanese eShop, but did not seem to appear on the US eShop. So yeah, this is another one where I think since it didn't have that much of a pre-existing audience in the US, it didn't really have that much of an impact. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting title. It's not bad. Our next section is the somewhat strange Mario remakes that we've been getting lately, namely Super Mario RPG and Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. These are pretty unexpected choices. I think both of these have been requested by fans to some degree over the years, but there's never really been that much expectation that either of these are particularly likely. I was really personally glad about seeing Super Mario RPG remade. I played it on the SNES Classic a couple years back, and I loved it. It's my favorite of the Mario RPGs, though granted I have not played any of the Mario and Luigi titles, and I've been meaning to get on that. But either way, of the Paper Mario games and other Mario RPG titles I played, Super Mario RPG is my favorite. It has a unique SNES Square Enix flair to it that I really appreciate. It has a very unique feel compared to basically any other Mario game, so seeing it remade was pretty shocking. I think this remake is a total success and improves on the gameplay quite a bit. There's a new combo system where you chain together attacks. The difficulty has been rebalanced and it is quite a bit easier. I know that some people will dislike that, but personally I found it led to a far more enjoyable experience. I actually found the original Super Mario RPG slightly too difficult, not super great at RPGs, so it was welcome for me personally to have a slightly lower overall difficulty, though granted I can understand some people disliking that change. Aside from that, the visuals and music have been totally redone and I think are phenomenal. Some of the best visuals and music on the Nintendo Switch system. Yoko Shimomura, the original composer, came back for this game to re-orchestrate all the tracks, and they came out exceptionally well. Many of them have new elements that have been added to them, like the world map screen has been extended, and the isometric visuals just look really great. It was super weird to play a full-price Nintendo published isometric game in the year 2023. That was a very unique and odd experience, but that's just one of the many charms of Super Mario RPG. Yeah, what a great title. Total recommendation for me. One of the best games of last year. Not too much in terms of additional content. It really is a pretty straight up remake with some slight rebalancing and minor additions, but nothing too major. Either way though, wow, what a success and what an odd choice. I really never would have expected this, actually. It's pretty surprising. And then of course there's Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. Also did not expect this, but yeah, Thousand-Year Door is a great game. I played it a bit ago through entirely legal means because it's very affordable in the aftermarket, as you can see. So that's one great thing about this remake, is that in terms of accessibility, it makes this title far more accessible to the general consumer, and the visuals look really nice. And you know, I have high expectations for this remake, and I think it'll be really great when it does come out this year. It was a bit of a shock to see that, especially right back to back with Super Mario RPG. Really strange decision. I don't know what's going on with the Mario RPGs, but I approve of these remakes. The other Mario title I'm going to talk about is Mario vs. Donkey Kong, which is another GBA remake. So we've had 2 GBA remakes in the span of a year, which is kind of crazy. And this one does have the sort of unfortunate thing, like with Advance Wars 1 and 2, where, you know, the Nintendo really could have just re-released those games on GBA NSO, and they haven't really aged all that much. So it's a little awkward to have full remakes of them. But with that said, these games are quite good. Mario vs. Donkey Kong I did really enjoy. It's high quality, developed by Nintendo Software Technology. This is a really nice remake of the GBA game, which I've only played a little bit of. It's very simple puzzle gameplay, but very satisfying as well, and the presentation is top-notch here. The visuals look great, and the music is outstanding. It uses live instrumentation. Some people were complaining about the price on this game. It's at $50, which isn't a full $60, but personally I think that's fine. In terms of the amount of content you're getting out of it, it's really not that bad. I wouldn't say it's the longest game. It is reasonably short, but there's a decent amount of replayability, especially after you've gotten to the credits. There's quite a bit that unlocks for you to play as additional content. You know, I'm not going to go out here and defend Nintendo's pricing model too much, but I think that $50 for this is fine when you compare it to the other things that Nintendo's releasing. But yeah, like I said, if Nintendo had released this just on the GBA NSO, it really would have been fine. That said, we do get really nice soundtrack and some great visuals out of this remake, and it does have some additional levels, as I understand, though granted, they're all new to me since I hadn't played that much of the original either. Our last title of the day is an upcoming one, and it's, I guess, technically not a remake, but, I mean, let's include it here anyway as a discussion point, and that's Endless Ocean Luminous. I have a very limited experience with this series. I played a little bit of the first one on Wii. Gameplay-wise, it's very simplistic, as I recall. You kind of just swim around and look at the lovely sea creatures, which is fun. But yeah, it's a total surprise to see this game come back, and with a wholly new entry. I would have expected them to just remake the first one or do a double pack of the first 2 games. Nintendo is really going deep into their back catalog with these titles. The developers who are responsible for these original games are wanting to come back and redo them. Okay, those are my weird Nintendo Switch titles that I'm discussing for today. Pretty certain that we're going to see more of these in the future, and I have a few that I would like to request. First of all, Steel Diver. Steel Diver was released on the 3DS as a launch title. The first title is like a 2D submarine game where you are a submarine and you control it in a 2D plane. Not too exceptional in my opinion, though the visuals are nice and it's kind of novel. The sequel, though, Steel Diver Subwars, I really love. I think that's one of the 3DS's best multiplayer titles. It had really great online multiplayer. I say that in the past tense because it's totally dead now and you cannot play it. It was great. Really fun multiplayer, some wacky maps. There's a fish tank level, a swimming pool level, obviously more standard levels. They had some fun DLC like a Star Fox submarine and a bunch of historical submarines. Yeah, it's a first-person submarine game, and nothing really has ever been done like it before or since, and I like it a lot and would love to see that come back. That's the kind of thing where at this point in the Switch's life, they're just kind of doing these weird titles because I guess the install base is large enough and they need something to release to keep momentum up until the next system is out. I guess this is what the development studios have, is remakes of these more obscure titles, which I very much approve of. The next one is one that would be a pretty big deal if it were to be announced, and that's Kid Icarus Uprising. Would love to see a remake of Kid Icarus Uprising, or hell, even a sequel, not super likely, but a remake. Man, that would be really swell. Yeah, one of my favorite video games in general, honestly. I love Kid Icarus Uprising. Everything about it is exceptional, especially at this point. The Switch install base is so high, and getting just a really high quality title like that, I think that would be great. And I'd say has the potential to sell quite well. There's a lot of other more obscure Nintendo titles that definitely would be fun to see. Those are just 2 that I could think of off the top of my head. If Endless Ocean can get a sequel, and Another Code, Advance Wars, and Famicom Detective Club can get remakes, hell, why not Steel Diver or Kid Icarus? That would be really cool. Please do that. actually. I would like to see it.
Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into some of these titles. I think I've covered a majority of the titles that fit into this category that I can think of, and I did include some of the Mario titles because even though those are Mario titles, the choice to remake them on the Switch is still pretty surprising and kind of odd, even if they're still under the umbrella of being a Mario game. Well, you've all been a great audience, and I'm going to venture out into new lands. Goodbye.